This is the first time the company's lost U.S. subscribers since 2011 when they split the mail-order DVD and the streaming business. What's your top-line reaction here?
You know, I hate to bore Lucas because he actually tweeted that he's tired of talking about this. I think that price increases probably drove the subscriber loss domestically, and I think that they're probably bumping up against the ceiling on what they can charge and continue to grow. I personally believe that they'll keep 80% of their domestic subscribers at as high as a $20 monthly charge, but you know, their last 10 million subscribers are probably middle-income households, and they notice when prices go up a couple of bucks, which they did in January. And I think that you're going to see continued defections as content migrates away from the site and as competition starts to materialize. Disney Plus in the fall, Warner and Comcast next year, more content leaving at the end of this year and the end of next year. So I think middle-income households are probably going to have to think about whether they subscribe to 1 or 2 or 3 plans. Yes, they can cut the cord and maybe afford all of them, but the fact is that Netflix did see a decline in domestic subs. That's what fuels their international expansion. They're about to lower prices in India, so I just don't see how they're really worth the $450 price target most of my competitors have on the stock, and I think today's correction makes a lot of sense.
So to avoid being boring at all, Lucas, you did tweet that you'd be talking about Netflix's quote-unquote big whiff and that you'd be duking it out with Michael Pachter. So bring it. What's your take?
Well, I think the big question for investors, for analysts, is this a blip or is this a long-term problem? You know, the second quarter for Netflix has been a problem in the past. Second quarter 2016, they missed their forecast by quite a bit, though not as much as they did today. And they had kind of warned investors and warned everybody at the end of the first quarter that this was going to be a light one. So is this, again, a one-time phenomenon, in which case you have this correction today, or is it something where we can't trust their forecast for Q3? Because Netflix's response to all this is going to be, well, we forecast 7 million for the third quarter. We're still on pace for the biggest year yet. But as we've seen in this quarter, their forecasts cannot always be trusted. They miss on these a lot. And so if they miss again next quarter, which is going to come around the same time that Disney is reporting, or excuse me, introducing Disney Plus, that becomes a real problem for investors, especially if growth is not only slowing in the US, but slows overseas, which has been the engine for the past few years.
Okay, so let's talk about the current quarter where they say they're going to add 7 million subscribers, which is a huge jump from 2.6 million. Of course, we know this quarter Stranger Things is back. As for last quarter, they've highlighted Dead to Me, they've highlighted Murder Mystery. But does this mean it is so dependent on an original hit like a Stranger Things, and does that make it more challenging because subscriber additions really depend on a huge hit?
You know, it must. Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry,
No,
Michael, you first.
Oh, you know, I honestly think what Lucas said is right. I think this is a blip. I think that Netflix subscriber growth is going to be like movie box office, and when there's lots of great stuff, I think they're going to see an increase in subs. The numbers on Stranger Things are pretty impressive. It is a really good show. They have a handful of really great content, and so I think that they'll probably hit their 7 million sub number. I think the real problem is next year when there's competition, and I think that we saw a preview of next year with this quarter. So I think next year you'll probably have a couple of quarters where they actually lose subs.
So, Lucas, then can the hits keep coming?
Yeah, I mean, the other issue I see to that point is just look at the volume of shows that they released in the second quarter. I know that they didn't have a Stranger Things or an Orange is the New Black, but I was doing research yesterday ahead of the earnings report. They would have something new come on. It seemed like every day. Sometimes on Fridays they'd have 5 new projects. There'd be a documentary, there'd be a stand-up special, there'd be an anime series, there'd be a movie. If none of those are moving the needle, if it really is only kind of a handful of shows that swing it, that is a little bit concerning just because of the volume and how much they're spending. Now, that being said, they do have a pretty good track record of coming up with a new big hit out of every few quarters, and if they can keep that going, they'll be fine. But they do seem to have a volume issue.
Well, and that's a good point. You know, we've talked a lot about the hit shows. We haven't talked about the shows that are truly not great, and I've seen some of those. And so, Michael, how good of a business model is it to be throwing everything at the wall and producing a lot of stuff that really isn't that great? Or, you know, is the HBO model of sort of, you know, very few, more high quality content, is that better?
By my count, Netflix produces about 10 times as many shows as HBO, and they get about the same number of Emmy nominations. So, throwing stuff at the wall, throwing 10x at the wall, they're going to have their hits. I actually think subscriber growth is going to be based on one of two things: either water cooler chatter kind of shows like Breaking Bad and Ozark and Stranger Things that we talked about when they were on and we told people they have to see, or good enough content, which is high quantity of okay content. And that's the real acid test. Do they have enough stuff that's good enough to keep us coming back? I actually think all these metrics they're giving us on the crap shows is telling you people are willing to watch whatever they throw at them because they're running out of really great stuff to watch. So you get 40 million people watching Adam Sandler, which shocks me, but it happened.